Hey guys, Mark Ferrasci with Protect Dog Training. We're heading out to go to Home Depot and Lowe's and start working some distractions as far as environmentals with our dog that we've got in, German Shepherd, that's in for reactivity. And his problem is mainly dogs, but the first thing I do with reactivity is I condition the behaviors that I need to have to work with at home. So the biggest one of those things that we use the most is a right about turn. And what we're going to do is we're doing an escape and avoidance, and we're building in on that on purpose. So the dog respects and wants to avoid that correction. It's real important because you can handle it with cookies, you can do that behavioral adjustment training, and you can read a lot of these different all positive context in dogs. And they're valid, don't get me wrong, okay? There's little kernels of truth in everything that we use, all right? But you're going to have the people that are all positive and in that camp. The bottom line is, as a professional, you're paying me for my time, okay? So that being the case, if I handle it with food, it might take me 6 months to recondition that dog and to do that job, okay? And I'd be, excuse the language, I'd be dicking around for a long time, okay? So I can get to the point where I can get a lot faster results and a lot better results, and then a relationship with the owner based on avoidance and escape training, okay? So I'll do a right about turns, and I'll build in on that, and first you teach the dog, then you show the dog, and you start a correction phase, and you go in through the correction phase, and they learn to avoid that correction, and then basically they understand consequence. All animals in God's green earth learn from consequences, either positive or negative, okay? So when you do it the right way, you teach the dog to respond to that key word and to create that action that he wants to beat that correction, okay? And when you do it right and you have the carrot, and you have that carrot right out where he needs to, he's going to start running to that answer that's always yes. 2 and 2 always adds up to 4. In other words, consistency, okay? Consistency of routine, going through and doing the job. So right now what I'm basically doing is I've got these behaviors built at home. And now I'm starting to slowly go into environment and starting to ask the dog to do the same thing when he may be distracted with something else. And I'll keep having the dog be responsible to the obedience, and I'll put the responsibility on the animal and make sure that he understands he's got to make sure that he's doing his job. And then we start slowly building into the major problem that he has, which is reactivity. Keep in mind, for a year and a half of this dog's life, he's been going down the street with the owner, hearing the dogs in that yard and going off on that fence line, and that behavior has been escalating and getting more and more, okay, with the owner's inadequacy. And it's not their fault, they just don't understand how to do things, and them not correcting the dog properly and only escalating the problem because they're doing that hold me back syndrome that I was talking about, where you're getting more and more escalation of the behavior because you're not correcting the dog properly, and the dog's only spinning out and getting worse and worse through opposition reflex, through not respecting timing, and not really going at it with an intent of what you expect of the animal. A lot of this done is contextual. I just was doing it this morning. I got the dog out in the morning, and I've got a bunch of dogs in a yard. They're all going to the potty break, 2 or 3 of them. I've got one that's real heavy on the fence line, a lot of barking and going crazy, and that causes that stimulation that this dog is used to going off on, okay? And I'll right away go right towards it. I do a right about turn, correct him, a lot of praise in the backside, and I start dipping into those right about turns towards that stimulation, towards that distraction. There's a lot that goes into it as far as distance, as far as what I call floating the bubble. We'll be doing more of that, and I'll be trying to convey that to you. I'll probably have to whiteboard it for you. And I'll whiteboard it, and then I'll see if I can get somebody to actually tag along and film me and watch me how I work the distance and what I call floating the bubble. The best way to understand floating the bubble, before you see it in real life, is that the dog has a certain energy level and intenseness that he's putting out with his body language and what he's putting out to the world, okay? Think of that like a bubble that's around you, all right? And that distance is threshold, wherever that may be. So I sense and I read the dog's body language. I see the other dog in the park, and they've got a bubble around them, okay, of energy. Let's call it energy, okay? Basically, it's their threshold and where they're giving off energy towards their projecting with their body language and communication where their threshold is at and where they may have a problem, okay? So we will go float the bubble. We will drive towards that with my dog, and I will sense in my dog, and I'll read my animal and see exactly where that's at, and I'll start doing right about turns with the threshold just below his level to go off. What I want is I want to build on success. So if I've already got these behaviors built in at home, and I've been giving him the wins when I do my right about turn, and right away there's praise there when he does the right job, I've got that conditioning already started to set in. When I go out in public, I start to float that bubble, and I want to make sure that I give him repetition of me doing the right about turn and some of my other obedience turns to get the dog to understand that he's getting a win by doing the right behavior. And my praise is right there, my hot dogs are right there, maybe a motivational toy might be right there. Show him how to win, all right? And then you float that bubble and you go a little bit closer and you go right to that level of threshold, do the right about turn. You may end up getting past that threshold where you have to do one where he's in that reactivity mode, and now you have to do a right about turn and correct him for it. Go away, get yourself some distance, and right away start the same pattern of him doing the right about turn where, again, your threshold, you're at a farther distance. And I always tell my customers, distance is your friend, okay? So understanding how to float that bubble and dip in, and you're talking about thresholds, okay? And dip into the area, in and out of that area that may be too much for him to handle, and just underneath, because we want to make sure that we build the dog on successes. So we do that before he goes off, and that intermixing of those, that little pattern right there is the key to handling 90% of reactivity, okay? Especially with this dog. The dog we're talking about now has a set-in behavior pattern where he's going out and going off and going out of threshold and going off with his owners not being able to handle that and only escalating the problem. So it's going to take some consistency in our patterns that we set up to teach the dog that every time he starts to load up, every time he starts to get his ears up, his eyes on, whatever it may be, I'm going to do a right about turn. So now he's going to end up starting to be worried more about where I'm at and his responsibility to the obedience routine than he is about the other dog, see? And that's the key. That's what you're looking for, is trying to make sure that you do it in such a way that you show him how to win, very important, and then you also show him the consequence of his negative behavior. But you have to be fair. If I overwhelm the dog and I put too much on him too soon, I'm out there correcting the dog, and his reactivity level is going to come so high up, he's not going to feel it, okay? And there's the key right there, that whole emotional spectrum where the dog is in a point of view that he doesn't hear you. He doesn't know. We call that red level, okay? Now, when I was with Caesar, I taught Caesar the word red level, okay? I use red level, he uses red zone, okay? Very similar. Why is that? Because he didn't want to use my words, okay? He's red zone dog. So now he's turned a whole word through his show into something that he calls red zone. It's actually what I taught him years ago about red level, okay? It's where the level of threshold has the dog and he goes off, and now with a pit bull breed, this is where it really comes from, your mastiffs, your pit bulls, their red zone, as he calls it, goes so high that they don't even feel anything, and you're past that point of being able to get any results because the dog's not clear in the head, okay? And he's not going to respond to that, and you're only going to exasperate the problem. So your ability to float that bubble and keep that level of reactivity just below where he's going to go off, and to show the dog through patterns and routine how he wins and where the reward is at so he can avoid that correction, okay? And that's all we're basically doing. This stuff has been done for years, folks. There's a lot of people that are into positive only training that will totally go off and disagree and get all upset because they feel that their methods are better than ours. Reality and truth, there's kernels of truth in everything that we do. And with a balance trainer like me, I have every time I want to try to get as many little kernels of truth, many little diamonds in the rough as I possibly can, so that I have those tools in my tool belt. And then it's up to me to manage, manipulate, and handle that dog in my training routine in such a way that I'm not being abusive, okay? That's the key, okay? Because if I go out and again and overwhelm that dog and have over threshold to that dog and start correcting the hell out of him for what he's doing, you're starting to be abusive. Floating that bubble is the answer, okay? how to keep it just below threshold, how to keep the dog learning to always, how do I win, and where to go to for his successes, okay? If you don't do it in the right pattern, you don't do that, we're going to go ahead and whiteboard a lot of this, and we're going to get into it, hopefully letting you see this on film so that you can see it actually happening. And when you do, you'll start to click and understand it, and then there'll be a lot more people that do this on their own, and I'll be out of work. But hey, that's what it's all about. It takes a lot to be able to get good at this stuff, and to be able to have the timing, and to be able to have the ability to read environment and to manipulate environment, okay? Right now it's about 8:44, it's early in the morning, or earlier, trying to beat the heat out here in the high desert, and we're headed to Lowe's. So think in your mind what that environmental is going to be at 8 o'clock in the morning versus at 12 noon, or maybe on the weekend, okay? There's going to be more environmental out there when you head out on a weekend, or on a busy weekend where it's a holiday, or you go on the work in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day when maybe there's no activity at all, and I can still go to that same environment. That's what I'm always thinking about when I use environment. How to manipulate an environment to give me just enough stimulus, just enough environmental, that we don't go over threshold and we're being counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve, okay? So if you watched that video yesterday, I was down at PetSmart in the middle of the day in a dead aisle. There was no real thing, and I was floating into my distractions a little at a time, but I didn't put too much. I was only testing probing yesterday. And we'll start to increase this as we go along. Always be cognizant and aware of what time of day, what day of the week, if it's a holiday, am I going to a major convention and I'm walking into a major environmental that may be overwhelming for the dog. That would be counterproductive, wouldn't it? Okay, so that's the whole thing of using environment and thinking and understanding that. I do it without even thinking because I've been doing it so many years, and it's instinctive for me. If I have too much of an environment, I show up and the place is just zoomed out for whatever reason. Maybe they're having a rescue day down at PetSmart, and there's all kinds of dogs, and there's just too much for my dog to be able to handle. That wouldn't be a good day to go, okay? Because I'm slowly trying to increase a little bit more and a little bit more of what I expect of this animal, okay? So I apologize for all the jabbering, and maybe some of you can understand this stuff and maybe some can't. We'll keep trying to come back to it and show you on film what we're doing. We're going to do our best to try to get that. It's contingent on, and it's affected by my ability to get somebody to be out with me and film me. So we're going to try to see if I can recruit some help in that department, in that area, and if I can get somebody to watch me and film me, and we can set up some of this so that we can get it on film for you. You'll start to see this stuff come together and how I handle my overall training program for a reactive dog. Okay, so I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day, and thank you very much for listening to my videos. This is Mark Ferrasci with Protect Dog Training, talking about reactivity and how I handle that with my dogs. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.